HD Extreme. Either way, you could bet we're the best looking station in the country. Folks, Sean Michael Small here, sans my co-host, hashtag re-release Keita Shah. We wait for those days, we miss those days. However, later on I will be joined by our usual contributor on Thursdays, Senator Jayanti Lakshmi. The concerns over hacking continue, and they continue to grow. That's one of the interesting yet unfortunate parts of this ongoing saga. Usually, when there's something controversial in the country, it happens, and maybe we get more news about it and then it dies down. But in this case, either we're hearing news about new incidents or all incidents that we're now getting word of as the situations continue to unfold. But so it's interesting. I do wonder to what extent if this was just an eventuality, but more on that later. There's some other things that I want to get into this morning. Of course, crime waits for no one, and this, as well as a tourism topic that I'll agree with the authorities on this one, at least to some extent. What am I speaking about, folks? Well, let's start off today's daily review. And it's, when you're a news presenter, a television host, a speaker, depending on the subject matter, of course, you have to have an appropriate tone of communication, of speaking, of messaging. And it makes sometimes doing a show quite difficult because you don't necessarily want to feel like a downer or look all sad and mopey and depressed, have low energy, especially that last part, having low energy with regards to presenting something, because you want it to be interesting and engaging so that the viewers, yourselves, could, I guess, have your attention, give that little extra incentive. Hey, listen to this. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how important something is. It's difficult to listen to something that is monotone, low energy, boring. I get that. But this is not the first time where I've encountered this situation. Because again, starting off with crime, starting off with the murder rate, and starting off, well, at least in one case, it's a minor, but it's two teenagers. So one 14, one 18, gunned down, apparently in front of a parlor Tuesday night. We're now getting the reports now at 10 p.m. Apparently, they went to a parlor that they're not necessarily accustomed to going to because they didn't want to get in trouble for leaving the house at 10 p.m. because their parents would say it's not safe. And, well, this happened. Now, there's no indication to say that these two young men were involved in anything, nor was with any indication to say that their family was involved in anything. So the motivations for this shooting are very, very unclear. I think the owner of the parlor has complained that there are those in the community that want to put the blame on him, saying he was the target. And I think one of the reports basically said that the owner used to be potentially involved in illegal activities. But even that, it doesn't necessarily seem to be much there, unless there's a lot that we don't know. And this is just one of those things now that I think the implication where we might not necessarily fully grasp what they are. Because, okay, it's another minor who was gunned down. It wasn't necessarily broad daylight. They didn't go into their homes. But right now it seems as though his death, potentially, I don't necessarily think this is the case. Obviously, they have to have some reason to open fire. It might be collateral damage. They might not have been the intended target. But one would hope there would be a reason Otherwise, it implies that this was just a random killing. Young men out on the road in Aruka, looking to go to a parlor, and they were just gunned down for being there. This is one of those things where I think the police would do well to try and figure out the potential motive as quickly as possible to explain to us why this happened. Because let's be frank, if you leave all of us, myself, other people in media, other analysts, the general public, political opponents to the current administration, if you leave everybody nothing and you leave them to speculate, they're not going to assume the best. We'll all, to some degree or other, assume something bad, if not necessarily the worst. Now, two young men who potentially are not involved in anything, and as far as the reports go, I have not seen anything to say that the family members of the young men were involved of anything. 25 spent shells of 7.76 ammunition and 32 spent shells of 5.56. I do wonder if that's supposed to be 7.62, but anyway, the point remains. 55 rifle bullets to spray down two teenagers. And don't forget, the gentleman who was killed in front of the police station, he was gunned down with a rifle. I think it was 11 spent shells. Then the person that was killed not too long after him in St. Francois Valley Road at 5:45 the same day, he was gunned down with 5.56 shells, 18 rounds. And these two young fellas, 55 shells. First of all, handguns seem to be a thing of the past. Let's just get that out of the way, right? In all of these killings, it's been with rifles. And with that comes the increased risk of collateral damage. Rifle bullets will penetrate further, will go further, travel a further distance, go through harder objects that pistol bullets might not necessarily go through, have a greater chance of going through people. They might hit their intended target and still cause casualties behind the intended target when the bullets go through that individual's body, especially when I see larger rounds like the 7.62 or 7.76. I really think that's supposed to be 7.62. But anyway, and what makes the whole situation very tragic is the fact that, again, the family members of one of these deceased were warning him from venturing to certain parts of the neighborhood and was warning him about going out so late at night on foot. I mean, to be fair, my own mother doesn't like me if I was to go walking up the road at 10 p.m. It just is what it is, right? And there have been times where I've kind of taken that for granted, but now I might need to check myself. Maybe my area is not necessarily as bad, but at the same time, it's definitely not no safe haven against criminal activity. And it makes another report coming out of Belmont where the TTPS is dismissing claims that a curfew has been enforced at Rifle Hill and Belmont by members of a certain gang. Right? Apparently, there's a social media post that said, and I don't know if it's still up, but it said that the fellas from the 6th gang in Rifle Hill give Belmont a curfew. They say anyone under 35 they find outside after hours getting it. Well, I know Aruka is not Belmont, but still, I do wonder to what extent we are getting there. And really and truly, even if they don't have those declarations, there have been situations in the past that have led people to have self-imposed curfews for their own safety. And this situation here, right, it says it best. One of the one of the family members of one of the deceased basically said that one of the deceased, quote, won't go to the shopkeeper his mother knows because she will call his mother, so he didn't go to her. He went to another shopkeeper who is nearby. But I told him, don't go to that shop. There's unofficial self-imposed curfews anyway. We don't necessarily need a gang to make a formal declaration. Depending, I mean, even in high affluent neighborhoods, do you want to be on the road, outside? It's not as though they're completely immune to crime. And in some ways, some communities have complained about that, about criminal elements coming in. I mean, if you're going to do home invasions, it's not hard of a stretch to just say, oh, we'll just take out targets of opportunity on the roads. So I don't know. We're at 5:05. 5:05. You know, I'm pretty sure we are ahead of the pace. All we need is 2 meters a day for the next 90 or so days. And we're well over 600, right? So we're at 5:05 now. Let's just see how this is going to go. All right, next story. Bear with me with my overworked equipment here. Now, all of this is going on, and the Commissioner of Police was at the launch of the 2023 National Parenting Program by the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services at Belmont, at the Belmont Community Center. And what she said was, and this is a quote in the papers, what we are confronted with is an unrealistic expectation that the police can somehow miraculously transform the propensity, the disposition, the behaviors of people with criminal intent. How practical a proposition is that? Policing is not a substitute to parenting. Policing is not a substitute to parenting. And I to some extent, I do understand what she's saying, because she's right, at least on a technical level. She's right, at least on the level that, look, if it's reached to the point of policing, and if it reached so bad, right, we could only do so much to kind of stem the tide. Here's the thing, though. There's one major flaw in our argument, though. Deterrence is part of what prevents people from turning to crime. Deterrence. It's what prevents people from causing the stresses of their life circumstances from pushing them to crime, or those that think, hey, this might just be easier, and I want to have an easier life, and it's a dog-eat-dog world, and I want to take advantage. I don't want to be taken advantage of. Deterrence stops that. That's the last line of defense. And while I understand that policing will never be a complete substitute to parenting, to some extent, the extreme degradation of our situation is partially responsible for the lack of deterrence. So you could cast stones on parenting all you want, and there's truth to that, right? The minister herself went on to speak. They have anecdotal evidence of school children whose parents can't afford books, yet they will spend the money on brand name clothes and shoes, and then say, well, we can't afford books. And the minister basically pointed out what are the priorities of some parents. And you know what? I don't doubt that that could be very true. We've seen situations where we kind of look at the parents and say, you're not really understanding the job that you signed up for when you had this child, right? But at the end of the day, parenting is not easy. There's no handbook, and there's no formal education system to teach people how to be a parent. Maybe there should be. I don't know if we could fit that into life as it is, which is already overcrowded with a whole host of necessities for education, for jobs, career advancement, there's just too much things that one has to do in a day to say that they're gonna educate themselves on parenting like that, but maybe they should be, I don't know. And it's true that the breakdown of parenting in society is directly attributing to our crime problem. But so is our breakdowns in our education system, and so is the lack of deterrence. Because at the end of the day, maybe it's not to the same scale, but even in my alma mater, I remember there was a young man who basically dropped out of school without telling his parents, and he got a job somewhere before sitting CXC. And the teachers were so concerned, they eventually found him, they spoke to the parents, they got him back in school. I don't think his grades were that great, but they tried, right? He could easily be someone who slipped through the cracks, but for whatever reason, he decided to get a job, not necessarily to take the easy way out in life, that is to say, criminal activities and etc., etc. But if such a scenario could happen in a prestige school, why can't it happen even more often? There were classmates and guys in my form as I was growing up who probably did not come from the nicest areas, probably did not have to travel, probably had to travel through some of the worst areas. And as Kemia Pascal, one of my colleagues, said on the show not too long ago, like what happens when they go back home, even if the parents are great, as Janelle said, you know, good parenting could help when you're in a bad area. I don't necessarily want to push the stereotypes. But there's a whole host of environmental factors of the community, of the elements, the criminal elements that might be in and around there. Now, sometimes in one of her examples, she said, well, the fellas on the block kind of told her family member, listen, you're not part of this sort of life, so stay out. And kudos to them for that. But at the end of the day, we can't just throw our head in the sand and say, well, all of this happened, so what's the commission is basically saying indirectly, well, what's the point of policing? I don't have high expectations for it. Either that or it sounds like just an excuse. Because it's one thing to say, well, okay, there are high levels of crime. We can't stop it. It's true. The police generally can't stop the crime unless, and I'll get to the story later on, they are there while the crime is ongoing, right? But they can't necessarily stop it unless they just happen to be there. But what they can do is arrest people for it. And we're not talking about the total number of arrests. That's not what has people upset. It's the 13 to 16% detection rate for murders. It's one thing if there were 500 murders, and if there were like 400 arrests, 250 arrests, 200 arrests, 20%. Can't even get that. We maybe a little close to 20%. But oh gosh, half. If you're going to get half of all murderers arrested and charged, I mean, that still doesn't necessarily mean half of all murderers will be convicted, huh? One would think that with so much crime, if our investigative, evidence collecting, all of those things, forensics, detective work, police work, roadblock, all of the various methods and strategies, if they were effective, we should have a higher rate of detection, a higher rate of arrests, and that will translate to not directly, but a higher rate of conviction, but we don't have that. And that's the issue that we have with the police service at the end of the day. No one is necessarily blaming the police service per se for 500 plus, 600 plus murders a year. But don't come and tell me, well, it's their fault, it's not my fault, when you have a 13 to 16% murder detection rate. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that when someone is gunned down in front of a police station. I don't want to hear that right now, at least not from you. If the Minister of Education would say that, that's a whole different ballgame. Because that's That's a minister admitting some of the failures of the ministry under her purview. But you have nothing to do, sorry, I take it back. It's parenting. You don't have anything to do with parenting, and you're speaking about parenting. Speak about your own thing. Minister Cox, okay, she could speak a little bit. Minister of Education could speak a little bit. Minister Cummings could speak a little bit. You don't speak about that. Worry about your own situation. You wanted to be Commissioner of Police. You can't control what parents do or don't do. Don't worry about that. That's not for you. Worry about what your police officers are doing or not doing. Parenting have nothing to do with professionalism in the service. Parenting have nothing to do with customer service. Parenting has nothing to do with response times, police corruption. I mean, it indirectly does, but you know what I mean. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, more topics here, and then later on we'll welcome my guest. Stay tuned to Talk About on WSN, your content capital. We'll be right back.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Welcome back to Talking Point, and we still have some of the daily review to get through. The next story is something that, well, it doesn't bother me as much as the previous 2 topics, but it's still something that is important to me personally. It's not necessarily important to everybody in the country, except if you care about diversification and if you think tourism is an important part of our country's potentially diverse economic future. And of course, there was a story where I didn't necessarily touch on it before, but I think now is the time to comment on it. there was some tours, 300 tours approximately, or tourists rather. Last Saturday, taxi drivers were not available in order to take them on scheduled tours around Tobago, right? And speaking to Frankie and people who work with Frankie, there are things in Tobago to see. Tobago has a lot more to offer with regards to just locations and attractions, not necessarily anything too cheesy, but legitimate things that could be of interest to tourists than quite a few of our CARICOM neighbors. We just seemingly don't know how to properly manage our own situation. Right? Tobago is a beautiful island that is underutilized. Now, I don't necessarily want to see what's going on in the Crown Point area with a concrete jungle in random mismatch being built up all over the place. Right? A little bit more elegance and planning and you know, in order that it all makes sense and it all looks organized and not necessarily too foreign, too much concrete, not enough of the natural beauty of the island, which that's one of the things going for Tobago. The fact that we have so much untouched rainforest, hills, waterfalls, trails, bird watchers come there. I mean, of course, the coral, hopefully, the environmental impact against that is reversed and the coral will be allowed to come back to what it was in its heyday. But the thing about this situation, the Chief Secretary has called out about it, and he has warned. And this all stems from a dispute that the association, the taxi association has with the agent for the cruise lines, right? Due to lack of payment. And this is an ongoing issue. I think we've spoken about this at least once before, a while ago. And basically, the Chief Sec said, you know, if you know that your position was that you are not going to do it because you weren't paid for some time in the past, just indicate you are not doing the service. Don't accept the cruise and then not do it. That is where I have a problem. And listen, I can't fault that statement at all. I cannot fault that statement at all. Because what these maxi fellas don't realize is they are not just harming the agent who they want to strike against. They are harming the reputation of Tobago and the reputation to some extent of Trinidad and Tobago, right? Although the irony, of course, is depending on the politics of the time and the success of making Tobago its own entity, Trinidad might be immune to this sort of thing, but that's besides the point. The point is the reputation is being harmed of one of the most beautiful islands, and it is still to some extent an undiscovered gem by many around the world who do not necessarily know about Tobago. It's to some extent a failure of marketing by both our national government as well as the THA. I mean, people around the world know about Barbados and Jamaica, right? I remember hearing the stories about pairs when I was younger, or even some of my own experiences. You know, what part of Jamaica is Trinidad? And sometimes they forget about Tobago, right? So when you have a marketing issue, the last thing you need for people that are coming here, who could then take tours and see the island and who want to see the island, who could then go back and say, hey, I saw this here. And not a lot of people go to Tobago, so you all should go to experience it in its untouched beauty. Nah. We get what we get with this industrial action nonsense, which is not helpful. Now, the thing about it is, and this is something that is more in Tobago than other parts of the country, you cannot build up capacity for spikes in peak levels that are way out of proportion from your normal everyday requirements, right? You can't increase your capacity, your daily capacity, when you only really have these spikes at very specific times. And other than that, you have a much reduced level of demand, and that capacity will be wasted and it will cost money. And that's why I have an issue with people wanting to look at hotel occupancy during things like Tobago Carnival and saying, we need more rooms. Well, that's nice, but what about all the other times of the year that isn't the August vacation, the Easter vacation, Tobago Carnival, Great Race, Great Fair, well, that's near August anyway, maybe around Christmas. What about random weekends in September, random weekends in May, random weekends in late February, early March, around National Carnival, but not Carnival itself. And even Carnival itself sometimes is not necessarily subscribed to all that well by our domestic tourism market, right? If we just increase capacity, there'll be many weekends where all of this extra cost now, all of these overheads, this sunk capital now, we ain't making revenue, enough revenue to kind of offset that investment, to make back that investment, to give us returns on that investment. And it's the same thing for these taxis. If they can't get the capacity, something else needs to be thought up in order to get these tours done. But I think ultimately speaking, the chief sec said it best. You're damaging us in a way that we can't necessarily afford to fix because it'll cost even more. If one could argue we don't have the kind of money needed to market Trinidad and Tobago, right? But just marketing the island will cost a lot of money. Fixing the damage from bad PR will cost even more money. Do we have that? No. And I think this situation actually seems a little similar to what's going on in the University of the West Indies, where I would argue, listen, these students feel like they're set up and they're worried about their future, and it's damaging the reputation of the university that already lost some of its funding from government. Its funding got reduced. What would happen if less students subscribe to UWI? At some point, if this is a downward trend that continues to grow, and it's on the cusp, it's on the verge, it hasn't grown into anything like yet, but if this turns into something more, all of a sudden, there might need to be retrenchment due to redundancy in lecturing staff. I'm just saying, be careful you kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, right? And the Maxi Taxi Association, there are better ways, the Tobago Association, to do this. If you're not going to do the job, don't say you'll do it and then, ooh, there's a shortage. You need to figure out your story much better, because that ain't flying. As you said, I think, implied, don't take your local level of how you conduct business and want to do it on an international market, because you're competing against expectations born from other international markets. What you get away with on a local level, and this goes across the board, all countries in the world, what you get away with on a local level ain't gonna fly on an international level. Don't think so. Don't think so. And you're dragging the reputation of your fellow Tobagonians down with you. Last two stories, quick. The Integrity Commission has given a press release basically voicing its concerns over situations where staff members were verbally abused by some public office holders. They didn't give any examples. Of course, I think most of us would assume this to be very true and very real. In fact, it seems as though that the press release wants to imply that it's a minority of public office holders, which could be true. The thing about it is, though, is from what I understand, based on various sources, many major public office holders could be quite arrogant. And I mean, even government ministers, I don't understand what they are arrogant about. Most of them can't talk. Most of them could barely make any decisions or have authority to do anything. And the proof is in the fact that, you know, how much could they really do? And then those that do have authority to do things sometimes put their foot in the mouth, get it wrong, put egg on the government's face, and then have to be gagged, for it seems, for all intents and purposes. So I don't get what is this do you know who I am mentality, but I very much believe it's real. To be fair, though, a lot of the older politicians that I have interacted with on a private business level, no issues at all. But some of the younger party officials, so I don't know if some of them might have gotten public appointments, but some of the older ones, God bless them. Maybe it's a phenomenon of the young, more so than before. Or maybe this is just Taylor Zoll's time. I'm sure the professor will call it and speak. All right, let's take a break. when we come back, we will welcome our guest this morning. It's Thursdays, folks, so of course we have with us the opposition senator. Stay tuned, we'll be right back after this.
Don't know, but we are launching our tool called Backup, which is
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do now, Andrew.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Moore?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the right and back.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinidadians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this is screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital. Again, by Senator Gianti Lachmidial. And Senator, thank you for coming on the show, first of all, before we get into things.
Hi, thank you again for having me and for inviting me to be on.
So, of course, now one of the big stories that's kind of coming out, and it's somewhat surprising to how many facets of it is being exposed now rather quickly, and that is cybersecurity concerns in TNT. The biggest one, of course, being TSET's hack, which has eventually was downplayed, and it has led to both an investigation being called for and organized, as well as the CEO being, well, she has been replaced. I don't believe it's officially said if she was fired or if she resigned from her position. The implication is that she was fired. There's also been other situations with the Southwest Regional Health Authority. There was even a minor situation that the Minister of Public Utilities spoke about with regards to TT Post, although he said that it was somewhat prevented, and we don't know the degree of that attack. He says it wasn't as bad as TSTT. Given the fact that we haven't had the same results, I'm inclined to believe him, but the fact of the matter remains the same. It's not just these 3 incidents. There have been incidents in the private sector as well, I think PriceSmart, courts, etc., as well as a situation with the Attorney General's office not too long ago. So what do you make of this whole situation, just to start off?
Well, the first thing that I think is, painfully obvious is poor communication. Very, very poor communication in terms of these issues. The mere fact that in our brief 5-minute run-up this morning, you have so many questions still on your mind, it means that those are the questions on the minds of the population. What exactly happened? What went wrong? Why did this happen? What are we doing to prevent it? And what is the extent of the damage? And I think that especially state agencies have been, guilty of that poor communication. I've read about the departure of the CEO of TSTT, and again, nobody knows. And I think that that's very important. TSTT tends to like to manage itself as though it's a private sector company. That's not the case. They are 51% state-owned, and persons on their board are appointed by government. They, they get government funding or whatever it is. They are, they should be more accountable to people within the country. So is the replacement of a CEO really just a deflection to say, well, okay, we've changed out the CEO, and that's supposed to give the population some comfort when you have businessmen with their credit card information, their ID, their, everything out there floating around the place. Do we need more answers than just that? And I think obviously, yes, we do. Replacing the CEO doesn't change the fact that perhaps somebody lower down in management dropped the ball. So yes, you're saying you have an investigation. Well, this is a country where we keep hearing about investigations, and then we don't know. We haven't seen the investigation into the Nikwan explosion. We haven't seen the investigation to the incident where somebody lost their life at Nikwan after that. We haven't seen any report into the investigation into the file that grew feet and walked out of the Attorney General's office. We haven't heard what, so, and that it's taxpayers pay for those investigations, right? But we don't have any answers. We just simply don't know. So telling us that we're having an investigation, we remove the CEO, to me gives very little comfort. That is comfort to a fool. It really doesn't give us an answer. We need more answers from our state enterprises, which are collecting our data on their plans and what they have in place now and what they intend to do, seeing that cyber attacks are becoming more and more frequent. We had a Data Protection Act passed many moons ago. As a Joint Select Committee, it was discussed why it is that this, because we've been looking at legislation that remains unproclaimed or only partially proclaimed to date. And the government says since 2018, they've had a consultant looking at redoing the act, because with the pace at which technology is moving, the act is outdated and they need to make some changes. We're in 2023. And, we haven't seen a draft bill, we haven't seen policies, we haven't heard about consultations on our Data Protection Act, because if the law is there and it binds the states and it binds state enterprises, you may not have this approach being taken where people's data are being collected and not being put out there. Southwest Regional Health Authority issued a press release yesterday to deny the fact that their ransom had been demanded for the data from some hacker in Europe or whatever it is, right? And the amount, because it was reported in The Guardian. But Southwest still hasn't said what is the state of their ability to serve their patients. How much patient information is out there? Is the HIV status of people something that can one day show up on the dark web? Or are they, trying to prevent it? Is it that, I am told, and I'm subject to correction, I don't want to get sued, but I am told that, for example, people's blood work has not been available for the last 3 weeks. And that in urgent cases where it is because all of the systems dealing with blood work and so on are down and inaccessible at the moment, and that for the past at least 2 weeks, if you have an urgent request, something is urgent and needs to get done, they have been sending patients to private medical facilities, and people have been paying. In fact, people have been approaching a number of NGOs and so on that I know for assistance to pay for all this very expensive blood work at various private laboratories, because they cannot get it at any facility served by the Southwest region or that falls under the umbrella of SWRHA. Those are important pieces of information that ought to be shared with the public, and better communication ought to be done. And they ought to say, again, why it happened, how it happened, and what is the system. I understand that they are going into the filing cabinet and boxes to pull out physical paper to try to rebuild their system at this point in time. Whether that's a rumor, whether it's true, whether it's entirely accurate or partially accurate, the fact that people who are served by, I live in the region where I am served by Southwest Regional Authority, we shouldn't have to speculate about those things. We ought to have better communication.
I mean, what you just said, they're having to rebuild their records and their systems with paper. I don't know if it's a temporary measure or if literally they've lost so much data that they have to try to start from the paper records. And that's a bad sign, just the lack of any sort of digital backups. And this is one of the problems with hacks. Even if it's not a ransomware situation, it could cripple digital infrastructure. And at the end of the day, there's so many things that we want to be digitized. There's a whole ministry just for that. And many people in society are calling for the police, for records for business, all of these things to be digitized. And now this problem is more or less smacking us in the face. Back to the TSCT situation, because one of the members of your party has made a call against the board. And I could just, at the very least on the surface, I can understand this. The board is appointed politically. They have a certain amount of responsibility overseeing the executive. The union leader of the Communication Workers Union, though, he is basically saying, the executive has got to go. Now, I tend to be a bit more hesitant, though, to take these drastic actions because, like you said, was the CEO a scapegoat? Do we know? And will we ever know who was responsible for this? But do you think that, perhaps heads just do need to roll in order to send a clear message, whoever heads they are, and that might be another controversial thing, the termination. But to send a clear message, listen, this is not something that we could just take lightly and hope that it all works out in the end and put our heads in the sand. We need to take a stronger action on this. Or do you think we need to wait and see how this all plays out, because we could end up with a situation like the predecessor to the current central bank governor, who won his case in court. He was wrongfully dismissed.
Yeah, I mean, it's under appeal, but yes, it was. And again, it depends. So, and that's a question that why I think people are asking whether or not Ms. Agard resigned, or was she fired, or was she asked to resign? Was her resignation requested from the board? Because we don't want another situation where the taxpayer is now saddled with a bill to pay Miss somebody for wrongful dismissal, or for, basically being forced out and that sort of thing. We want to know that proper industrial relations practice was followed. Was she bought out? Was she paid to resign? Things like that are questions that the population would have, and we deserve the full disclosure of that information. But in terms of the entire board going, look, at the end of the day, and this is something that I have a serious problem with, because state boards are political appointees, people think it's political patronage, and they don't take their jobs very seriously. And I'm not casting aspersions on specific people on TSCT. That's a broad statement that I'm saying. A state board, a director, you have a responsibility for strategic direction, management, and decision-making for a company, right? That's the role of a board. So if you have people sitting on a board who cannot spell cyber attack and who don't know how to use WhatsApp properly, but they are responsible for the overall, for coming up with data, for approving data protection policies for a company like TSCT, where everything is digital and it's high-tech and they're offering all these services and stuff like that. What do you expect? We need competent people on state boards, and we need people who understand the importance of certain things. That being said, management of a company is the ones who will take, proposals to a board. So who is in charge of cybersecurity at TSCT? Which manager? Was a proposal made? Was a proposal made by that manager and rejected by the board? Was the CEO not take it to the board? all of that is information with respect to, I mean, we all know what corporate structures look like and how they operate. It's not a one-man operation. It's not a parlor where, you know, I decide today if I want to buy 5 cases of chubby or 10 cases of chubby and 5 cases of water. It's bigger than that. You really do have to drill down and determine whose responsibility was it to look at the cybersecurity framework available to TSTT. Did certain, you know, and I have some information with respect to Southwest Regional Health Authority that I'm trying to verify, but I will speak on it later on if I'm able to verify it and to get that information. But I think people have been dropping the ball. And you mentioned that we have an entire ministry devoted to digital transformation. Well, a key component of digital transformation, if we want to become a digital society, is being able to secure our data. So I think that ministry needs to come out and say, where are we with the Data Protection Act and the revision of the Data Protection Act? Where are we in terms of getting our state ministries first and then state enterprises later on and partially owned state enterprises up to speed with proper data protection? You know, and do we have a across the board policy for data protection, firewalls, all of those things? It is very important. And you know, when you have a proper Data Protection Act in place, it would bind even private sector companies like Quartz and PriceSmart and so on. So they cannot afford to drop the ball either because they will be in breach of the law if they don't secure your personal data. That's very important.
Well,
what are the consequences now for anyone who has lost data?
Well, so there's an interesting point made by Antamaka CEO Anthony Sabga. He is asking for legislation that will make it illegal for a company to pay ransom on cyber attacks. The idea, I think, is very similar to the cliche that you hear America does not negotiate with terrorists, because once you start, you know, once you set that precedent, then it makes it easier. More people will attack you and make more demands. And I understand that. What do you make of that? Because one thing to note, it doesn't seem as though a ransom was a part of some of these cyber attacks. So it might not stop all. But what do you think about that proposal?
It's something worth considering. I don't know that, you know, making it illegal, but I would say it's like a kidnapping. You know, at the end of the day, if you're paying a ransom, you sort of perpetuate the notion that this is easy money that could be made, right? But at the same time, it's like the same way that the life of a loved one might be at risk. If it is that, you know, serious personal data is out there and a company knows that they can get sued for bill. I mean, if a company, depending on the type of company, loses your information and people decide that, you know, some kind of class action style lawsuit for all of their information getting out there comes against that company could basically go under.
Right.
So at the end of the day, you have to balance those two things. What I would like to see is that we have a very well-equipped TTPS cybercrime unit that can work with these companies so that even if they have to do some sort of payment, but I mean, these payments are requested in cryptocurrency, that's a challenge around the world to track these things and so on. But to perhaps, you know, work with private sector so that these things could be tracked and stymied. But I think, you know, it's something to be considered. I don't know if that call came from Mr. Sabga because he has personal experience knowing that someone may have, you know, participated in that sort of a negotiation, and that is now why we're seeing all these attacks coming forward. I don't know. It's a possibility. Well, it is a possibility, but certainly want to look at it some more. And again, government policy is important and consultation is important because you want to get all perspectives on something like that.
Well, the last thing I want to ask, I'm not sure if you would know the answer to this, but the Minister of Digital Transformation, he basically made a statement, and I don't know the full details or context of the statement, but he basically said, well, there's $500,000 budgeted this year for IT professionals in cybersecurity, right, to hire. Right now, I don't know if that's limited to his ministry or if that's supposed to technically cover all of government. I don't know what are the terms that that those statements were made to speak of. But from your experience, and if you have any, do you think that enough is being spent on cybersecurity currently, or are we now having to play catch up as multiple situations occur across multiple government institutions?
Well, the fact that the Ministry of the Attorney General suffered a cyber attack, the entire company's registry went down for months. The state attorneys were coming to court without even being able to access their email. Now we have a situation at TSTT. Now we have, Southwest Regional, all of these. Clearly, we're not spending enough. That 500,000 can't be across the board. It might be within his ministry to hire people to get things done. Digital transformation has been a part of the government's agenda. It was once included as part of a ministry, and he was a junior minister. Now he got his own ministry. I don't know if hiring people is something that's such a great challenge that we have only now started to budget for it and all that, but it begs the question about where is the priority on cybersecurity and digital transformation coming forward. It certainly cannot be across the board for all government ministries. Yeah. What it might very well be is in his ministry, hiring people who can come up with policies. But if we're now looking at the policy and coming up with a way to have a seamless sort of cybersecurity policy across the board, we have a lot of work to be done. And in the meantime, we're very exposed, I would say, and so we have to put things in place to try to not expose, to minimize the potential for further attacks whilst we get our house in order.
Well, folks, that's more or less all the time that we have. I want to thank Senator Lashmiya for joining me to speak on this topic. I think it's something that a lot of the older generations might not be fully, aware of and understand the risk posed to them. And I hope this is conversations that we could continue to have as, the price of progress. This is one of them, right? New technologies, but new risks.
Well, thanks again for having me, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for joining us, Senator. And folks, we'll now break. News on the hour should be next. When we return, we'll open up the phone lines. Want to hear from the viewer? We could talk about anything you want to speak about. We could talk about what we spoke about on the show this morning. You decide, but that will come up next after this.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Minister Bacchus emphasizes holistic approach to cybersecurity. 23 schools vie for the Junior Parang title. Regionally, U.S. National Hurricane Center monitors dual weather disturbances in the Caribbean, and internationally, Qatar seeking Israel Hamas deal to free 50 hostages and 3-day truce. Now for the details. Minister of Digital Transformation Hassel Bacchus says that dealing with cybersecurity takes a very holistic approach. He maintains that cyber attacks will happen to organizations no matter what type of security is in place. That said, however, he stated that it is necessary to ensure that things are put in place to ensure companies are prepared for attacks. Minister Bacchus stated in addition to trying to prepare for attacks, there must also be a focus on preventing such attacks. The next generation of parenteros are getting ready for this weekend as they put the final touches to their presentations for the National Parang Association of Trinidad and Tobago's Junior Parang Festival. This event takes place on November 18th and 19th at the San Francisco Girls College, Belmont, from 9 a.m. Themed Mi Paranda. The competition will see 23 primary schools and 16 secondary schools vying for top honors. Last year's winners, Morva Anglican Primary School and St. Joseph Convent. St. Joseph are back in the lineup to see if they can take home the trophy once again. Regionally, 2 late-season disturbances have popped in the Atlantic Basin, according to the National Hurricane Center. One of the disturbances is located over the southwestern Caribbean Sea. Meteorologists said the large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms could become a tropical depression by this weekend as it moves northward across the western and central Caribbean. Internationally, Qatari mediators on Wednesday sought to negotiate a deal between Hamas and Israel that included the release of around 50 civilian hostages from Gaza in exchange for a 3-day ceasefire. An official brief on the negotiation told Reuters. The officials said the deal, under discussion and coordinated with the U.S., would also see Israel release some Palestinian women and children from Israeli jails and increase the amount of humanitarian aid allowed into Gaza. Well, that's it. News on the hour on WESN. I am Sarah Ali. Thank you for watching.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. So now is the time where we open up the phone lines. The number should be up on your screen. Call in. Let me know what you think about what I just spoke about. With regards to cybersecurity, that's a growing concern and it's an ongoing saga and it's coming in quite fast and furious. But of course, crime waits for no one and our murder rate is continuing to rise. Will it reach to the heights that we have seen previously? It potentially still can. We have about 6 weeks to go, as well as the fact that, look, when are we going to get serious about our tourism if we want to be serious about it? That, I think, is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Barbados is serious about their tourism. Jamaica, at least to some extent, is serious about their tourism, as well as other islands, St. Lucia, etc., etc., etc. And they have successful industries that might not necessarily give us the same wealth if we were to try to have similar success, but one would have to argue that we can't necessarily copy them. We'll just be a version of what they're doing. We need to have our own sort of product to take to the market. But with that said, what we can and should copy is levels of professionalism, as well as, to some extent, the expectations for ourselves and for our own work ethic, for our own productivity, for our own product, for our own excellence. Not necessarily to be perfect, but to be proud of what it is that we could put out there into the world. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again. We have international success, whether it's in sports, whether it's in beauty pageants, for whatever they're worth, although they were a bit more prestigious back in the day, one could argue. Whether it be for private industry, particularly in the oil and gas sector, right? Why is it now that our tourism should just be this laissez-faire thing? Maybe we're too accustomed to treating with our local customers who at times can be taken for granted, and now we don't necessarily, we're not all prepared to deal with foreign customers who don't have to come here. They could go elsewhere. We have our first caller for the morning from San Fernando. Good morning.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
I want to touch on two things this morning that you spoke about. The first one is that issue with the maxi drivers in Tobago. You know, I feel that it was good that happened, Sean, despite all the negative effects. And let me tell you why. This thing had to come to our front. What we had is we've had an agent that has had an ongoing issue with this association, and we remember we spoke about this previously some months ago when they had the other situation popped up. Now it tells you that all the touting of the cruise ship season are going to be a bumper season by the THA. It showed the gaps in the communication with the THA, because the THA, even though the chief secretary has chastised these gentlemen or this association, what it shows is that Stasia Boris's ministry dropped the ball, because you need to be able to check all these things to make sure that when the season starts that there are issues that are sorted out. So I am putting some of this blame on the Secretary for Tourism in Tobago, because if they were doing their job, this would have been avoided, because they would have recognized the situation, because this is a public thing that the association bring permanent to get their money back from Mr. What's his name, Mr. Cavallo. So it is good. So now they can smooth these things out, because this is what happens when you're looking to expand. There are gaps, and the gaps have to come forward. I don't think it's that serious an issue as Mr. Cavallo is making it out to be. And I think they're going to have a good season, and they're going to learn from this experience. Additionally, I really hope that the government of Trinidad and Tobago understands that some money has to be spent in Tobago, just like how they put in the airport. And I know I and you disagree on the airport, on this upgrade. I agree with the upgrade, and the port needs to be upgraded. If it is that you're looking for cruise ships, then you have to have facilities. So they need an upgrade. Secondly, quickly, Sean, that cybersecurity issue. I think what we have to start to do, at least at a government level, they need to build a record system that is independent of the internet. The problem is internet access in our system is what is causing a lot of these issues, because we know that. So to get into your system, so they need to build a system that is separate from the internet, so your records are safe, and you have an interface. It's possible, because I know of companies in different parts of the world that have done it to secure their data. So we, at least on the government level, they have to look at hardening the data protection by building a separate record system that does not have internet access for penetration for data to be stolen. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you for that, caller. That's a good point. I think it could be either, I don't know if a centralized site will be better, or if each database should have a offline backup that needs to be physically updated. Of course, that would need to have implemented controls with regards to ensure that malware doesn't go with the updates, because you don't want to have to manually re-enter the information a second time into the backup. But your point is very important, and that goes back to what the discussion I had with the senator. Why is it that we still have to use physical records in any capacity? There should be a backup. The backup might not be the most up-to-date, but there should be a recent enough backup, because these things are too important, particularly when it's health medical records. I'll respond to the rest of what you said after we do have a caller from St. Anne's. Good morning, caller. You on here? Morning.
Some of what your previous callers said. I remember some months ago you had this gentleman on, Mr. Caravallo, on your program. Both you and Keaton interviewed him at length about the situation that was existing at that time. What I find, Mr. Sanfernando referred to gaps, and I want to double down on that. I am not certain if this arrangement is between Mr. Caravallo and the drivers directly, or whether it's between Mr. Caravallo and the THA. I'm a little confused about that myself. What I do know is that Mr. Caravallo knew there was an issue before now. People are doubling down on the drivers as being a source of bad reputation in Tobago. I am not certain it's all on their head, because Mr. Caravallo had these claims of outstanding payments that went back quite a way. and I'm not certain that he addressed them as fully as he could have. I'm not certain on what basis the gentleman, the party, I feel a little out of hock to talk directly about that, but I do know that there's a discrepancy there. And it'll be interesting to note as well whether it's an exclusive arrangement. We can't find any other promoter or not on that side of the fence to bring the traffic to our shores. We have to depend on this gentleman alone. Arrangement, with whom is the exclusive arrangement, and what are the? These are the kinds of questions that people are asking and wondering about when we hear this debacle. It's not just about also of the relationship that Mr. Carvalho has with the cruise ships and what benefit, substantive or otherwise, is being had that we are being private.
Thank you, caller. You were breaking up, but I think I got generally gist of what you were saying there with regards to the agent and his potential exclusivity on what that contractual arrangement is. Again, I'll respond to this topic, but we have a caller from Maraval, so I don't want to keep him waiting any further. Good morning, Maraval. You on the air?
Hello, morning.
Morning, morning.
Hi, how are you, my good man? You know every month, every 3 months, boy. Hear me? I want to find out something. This property tax, which they're claiming and ranting and raving will have so many millions and millions going to the corporations, right?
Yeah.
In Woodbrook and St. James, City Corporation in Woodbrook, we are still so lucky, as Louis will tell you, that we get rubbish collected every single day and all that. Woodbrook residents has dropped from 100% to 20% because there's 80% commercial buildings. The government is not collecting property tax from all the government buildings that they're renting in St. Clair and Woodbrook. But the Sealot people, the Beaton people, they don't pay property tax. We have to pay property tax. But all the buildings that Rahal and them have all through Woodbrook, renting to the government, they don't pay property tax. How does that make sense? They don't pay property tax.
Thank you, caller. I mean, that's a good point. I'll respond to that, but that generally, that question speaks for itself, right? But I do have another caller from Shogunas. Good morning, caller. You on the air?
Good morning, Sean. I hope you hear me. I'm not hearing you.
Yes.
Or something seems to be wrong with the line. Anyway, I couldn't wait for call questions yesterday, so the first comment I will make, I should have made when I heard really repeat about Labre. The problem with Labre is not that government supposed to put this and put that and put the other. The problem with Labre is you have to have something generating the income. And there's only one government who ever did that. That is the one who I put up for called Bill Ramadan, who was supposed to look at the pitch lake and have a lot of downstream industries and things. Of course, when the government changed, they get rid of him, and that was that. As regards Tobago tourism, one of the biggest problems they had is when the Town and Country Parliament decided way back when, more than 30 years ago, more than that, to zone certain areas in Tobago for tourism, that they could provide security and all this sort of thing. People objected to it, and now you could put it anyway, and that does not help with the tourism. And my final point on cyber security, I mentioned this to you all before. The only sensible solution is what Dr. Eric Williams came up with, where you had a national computer agency, which would have been a body of top expertise, and they would have seen that the entire government service would have compatible systems of computerization, and they had, more importantly, proper information management. Every parcel of land in Trinidad is supposed to have a unique number. This was completed since, I think, 2000 and 2, but no government would put it into place. And every individual was supposed to have a unique number, and that was recommended that they use the EBC number, which they never did. Any questions?
No, Professor. I do have comments to make, but I do have another caller waiting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor. So I think it's Arima. We'll take the caller now. Arima, good morning. You're on here.
Good morning.
Morning. Go ahead. You're on here.
All right. You ain't getting fed up on how this country going. The problem with that TSTT cyber attack is this. If TSTT had come out in the first place and talk the truth, so instead of having the minister come into the parliament and giving a story, and then 2 days later in the press the story change, and then 2 days later it change, I think it would have a different result, you know. But it just goes to show us how much we have to plan and the areas that really need focus in this country. I hope the planners looking on and putting on the thinking caps. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Thank you, caller, for that point. I'll address that first. That's a very good point. That breakdown of communication. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that I talk about on this show multiple times, month after month, no matter what ministry, is communication. And I do have a question about it though. To what extent did the people at the top, and that's the CEO, that's the board, that's the line minister, because he spoke about it, the people at the top, the communicating specialists, the PR people, the mass comm people, the public relations, people, and the technical experts who actually had the technical information and probably gave them the terms and tried to explain the situation to them. To what extent were they not all on the same page? And that led to this. Because I do wonder if at some point somebody told somebody, let's just say it's this, right? To try to simplify the message, only to then turn out, no, that was a bad idea. And I feel as though to some extent that happened with regards to the Ministry of Health during COVID when they tried to simplify parts of the message, and around the world when they tried to simplify messages. Look what Anthony Fauci did to himself, right, with regards to the mask policy. First it was don't wear masks, now then it turned into wear masks. Because you're trying to oversimplify the message, you're not being clear to the people, and you end up turning the situation into a complete and utter mess. And this is what we get. This is what we get. A smaller scale, but a smaller scale, but a mess nevertheless. We have another caller on the line. Sorry, I didn't hear where the caller's from. Good morning, caller. You on here? Santa Cruz. Good morning. You on here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey.
Good morning.
Morning. I know that voice.
How are you?
I'm going okay. I'm going okay.
All right. A couple of things. Last week, I heard that there was a move towards a cashless society in Trinidad and Tobago. And then talk came out that, the Prime Minister never even used an ATM. All right. Before we get to there, can we please address the fact that you must pay cash at customs? And when we address that fact, please use as the underlying basis that once you make sure that you have on covered shoulders, no slippers on your feet, no shorts, before going into the waiting area, to wait to be seen before going to the back to see whatever your product is. How are you supposed to know what the exact cash is when you get to pay, when you have to pay for, your tariff? How are you supposed to know this? No. You have to leave. Go wherever, because of course there's no ATM on the compound. Mm-hmm. So you have to go into Port of Spain or wherever there's a bank so that you get the cash, and God forbid that it's lunchtime. Mm-hmm. Okay? Before coming back and having to wait again. So before we can actually get to a cashless society, please update and modernize all government offices so that, God forbid, people pay cash only and maybe a coin or a dollar bill falls under the table and we can't get to it. There would be no proper tallying of how much money was actually collected on the particular day. So could we please take care of that first?
Mm-hmm.
And quickly, the second thing is that this morning you were kind of fretting because the commissioner of police is calling out to parents to take care of their children. But I have to agree. Crime is a social issue, and it requires social participation, right? And as such, the commissioner is in her right to call on parents to do what they are supposed to do. Have a dream for your child in the first place, so that if you're living wherever you're living and under whatever circumstances, don't want the same thing for your child. Have a different aspiration for your child so you can show your child something different.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know that when you were growing up, you were getting your tail cut and you didn't like how your parents were dealing with you, change it. Try communication. Try talking to your child. Try putting your child to sit down and listening to your child as well. All right.
Thank you, Ms. Santa Cruz. We do have another caller waiting. I'll comment on that very briefly. I agree with you in the fact that she's not wrong with her reasoning and her logic. My issue, though, is how it was framed. It could come across a little bit of an excuse. And more importantly, the things that I do hold at account for, like the crime detection rate, that has nothing to do with parenting. Whether it's 100 murders or 500 murders, if the murder detection rate is less than 20%, that is a problem. It could be 50 murders a year. That is still a problem. And it's a communication thing. It's not that she's wrong, but I think it's more of a communication thing, similar to when she had to rate herself. How you view her accuracy on rating herself is besides the point. That's a no-win scenario that other people, her predecessors, knew not to do. But I agree with you. She is right in the sense that our parenting situation is one of the root causes. It's not the only one, but it's a major one. And it's one that we cannot afford to avoid just because we don't want to upset people. That's not how this works anymore. Children are dying. That's just not how this works. We have a caller from San Fernando. Good morning. You're on here. Hello? Hello?
Hello, Sean?
Hey, hi.
Yes, I'm calling back to answer the caller, your second caller, who asked about exclusivity with respect to Mr. Carvalho and the crucial business.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say this. Let me tell you, Mr. Carvalho was in this business when we had very little cruise ships coming to Trinidad and Tobago. Very little. He worked for a company called Perez Isia. I know Mr. Carvalho very long time, since in the 90s. And at that time, there were no ships.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Very little ships.
Yes.
And Mr. Carvalho formed his own agency and worked tirelessly to bring more and more cruise ships to Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this is a shipping agency business. And no other shipping agency have so many of them sort going after that business, because it's a very tedious and hard business to get involved in,
Yeah.
That cruise ship business.
Yeah.
So people have to understand, kudos to Mr. Carvalho for what he has done, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not taking that away from him. Mr. Carvalho has worked tirelessly to build this cruise ship business that we're seeing now. Comes off of the back of Mr. Carvalho,
Mm-hmm.
Don't get it wrong. It comes off of the back of Mr. Carvalho. He has done yeoman service to Trinidad and Tobago, which I don't think he has been recognized for. And okay, he has had issues with payments and stuff, but there are no agencies. It's open, but nobody wants to do. No agency wants to do the work to go in there and to hassle with the cruise ship business, because you have to bring them, you have to pull them to Trinidad and Tobago. And he has done that for over 30 years. So I want the caller to understand that it's not that Mr. Carvalho has a monopoly. It's that just nobody else has sought to go into that business because of how difficult it is. So have a good day again, sir.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for that. Yes, I have to admit, with all the shows that we do, sometimes It's not easy to recollect everything that was said with every interview, but I do believe that Mr. Vallo, he did mention some of that. And it goes back to my point with regards to not just tourism, but agriculture. We don't see major private sector investment. Remember, Hilton pulled out of Hilton Tobago, folks, right? And then the government had to refurbish it and rename it as Magdalena. And now they're trying to sell it, right? We do not have investments coming in to our tourism sector. And, you know, so again, kudos to him for trying to make it work. At the end of the day, so let me just wrap up this situation. I very much believe that to be true because the private sector drives tourism more than the government for the last, 30 years, right? The private sector does more for tourism than the government. And maybe the problem is the government leaves the private sector to its own devices too often. Of course, the flip side is, to what extent do you have trust that the government could intervene in a situation and not mess the whole thing up even further, right? Oil and gas seems to be the only thing that they don't mess up, but then look what they approved NICON until they didn't. I don't know if the gaps, caller from San Fernando, it will be filled fast enough, right? I understand what you're saying, that there are gaps, but there are a lot of gaps in our tourism sector development, and I don't know if it's going to be fast enough. That's the only thing. So to some extent, I don't know if this scenario is quite like how you perceive it. It might be just a matter of time, but that matter of time might be very, 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 very long. And the thing is, at the end of the day, though, if the government, I do want the government to market tourism for Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago on a whole. On some level, they need to have standards that the government will enforce. How strict they are, how extensive they are, the scope and scale of them, that's up in the air. But if the government is going to invest money to market an industry, which is technically private, you know, we do need to have some sort of regulations to prevent things like this from happening in. Because I understand what caller from St. Anne said, but at the end of the day, look, they could have taken the issue up another way, but they inconvenienced 300 passengers, which reflects badly on our overall tourism product. It just does. And why should these 300 passengers suffer? Right? And that's why I compare it to the situation with UE. Why should these students suffer? You have an issue with the management of the university, not with the students. But you're using the suffering of the customer, right? You're using the suffering of the customer in order to put pressure on the employer. And there comes a point in time where the circumstances of the individual situation means that it's going a little bit too far. Right? Okay, so I've been told over time, cashless society, well, yes, a lot of other government services require cash. And cash is it helps opportunities for all sorts of activities, I'll just say that. We want things to improve. We need to do our part to try to get them improved. I want to thank all of our callers for participating in the conversation. This is one of the first steps. This is dipping our pinky toes into the first step on trying to improve the nation, folks. But there's so much more that we could do within our own everyday lives, within our own avenues, within our own platforms. I encourage everybody to do so responsibly. Folks, we can make it a good day if we try, as my co-host always says, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
I'm Andy Johnson, and you're watching WESN, the content capital.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokaram, on WhatsApp Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this is screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the right and back.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinidadians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former Mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the home store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
A high bar to cross, but it seems that this relationship and these talks made it
possible to sort of appease the relationship, talk through some disagreements, and have some of those main announcements, including the military-to-military communications, very important, especially for the Americans, to avoid any potential escalation, because that's their mantra. We are in competition with China, not in conflict, not seeking a confrontation, and not being able to talk means that there are possibilities of misunderstanding that could escalate. And now, of course, this is a small bar, but it is a big step in going forward. That does not mean that the relationship between the U.S. and China all of a sudden is going to become rosy. There are still plenty of issues on which they don't see eye to eye. There's the economy, trade relationships, and of course the number one issue that is going to be a sticking point, at least in the next year, because we're heading into elections in Taiwan, and that is really where they tend to disagree the most. In the readout of these talks, there was a clear disagreement there, with the Chinese saying to the Americans, you need to stop arming Taiwan, while the U.S. was telling China, you need to respect their electoral process. So you can see there that there's plenty to go around when it comes to some disagreement. And then there was, of course, that comment about Xi still being a dictator, China not reacting very fondly to those remarks. But you're seeing at least discussion, even if those are not always positive.
All right, Ketavan Gojestani, our foreign editor. Thank you. In other news, and in a historic first, judges here in France have issued an arrest warrant for the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad. Along with his brother Maher al-Assad, the president is accused of complicity in war crimes, including the use of chemical weapons on civilians. Delano de Souza has the details.
Judges in France have accused Bashar al-Assad, his brother and two generals of complicity in crimes against humanity for chemical attacks in 2013. The move comes following a criminal complaint filed by a Syrian NGO.
It's a huge development. An independent jurisdiction is recognizing that the chemical attack couldn't have happened without the knowledge of the Syrian president, that he has responsibility and should be held accountable.
Investigative judges at Paris's judicial court have been investigating two chemical attacks under universal jurisdiction. Over 1,000 people were killed after suspected sarin gas incidents in Douma and eastern Ghouta in 2013. The Assad government was deemed responsible but continued to deflect blame.
It's completely fake. I mean, when you have chemical weapons, how could the doctors and nurses be safe dealing with the chemical atmosphere without any protective clothes, without anything, just throwing water at the victims, and the victim became okay just because you washed them with water. So it's a farce.
Syria has allegedly continued to use chemical weapons despite giving up stockpiles since 2013. News of the arrest warrant comes as Bashar al-Assad's diplomatic isolation continues to end. This year, the Syrian president has made trips to countries including the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and China.
Well, to talk a little more about that arrest warrant, I'm very pleased to be joined now by Steve Costas. He's a senior legal officer at the Open Society Justice Initiative. Welcome to the programme, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk about the warrant itself in just a moment, but first of all, take us back to 2013 if you can. This was the height of the Syrian revolution against Assad's regime. Chemical weapons were used in the suburbs of Damascus. Remind us what Assad is alleged to have done here.
So, as you said, the Syrian civil war was well underway at that point, and the Syrian government was losing control of various territory. The area of the suburbs of Damascus called the Eastern Ghouta and Douma were under the control of opposition groups and were largely populated by civilians. The Syrian government began using chemical weapons in civilian areas, and the attack in 2013 in Eastern Ghouta, which killed more than 1,000 civilians, most of them women and children, was one of the largest chemical attacks in this last century and is considered one of the most heinous crimes committed during the conflict.
And you've described the issuing of this arrest warrant for Bashar al-Assad as an historic moment. Just explain to us why.
Well, exactly. This is the first, it's historic in a number of ways. It's the first criminal case to address the chemical weapons attacks committed by the Syrian government. It's the first time in the history of international law and in the law on international justice that a foreign sitting head of state has been charged by a national court for international crimes. And it's the first time that victims have testified about what happened to them in a court to investigating judges. And so that these are all sort of really welcome developments and important for the victims, survivors, and for our Syrian partners.
Absolutely. That said, though, what do you think the chances are that Assad will actually face trial?
Well, there are a few legal questions still to be resolved. First, as I said, this is an unprecedented step by the French courts. It's I think what we are seeing is that the French courts have said the victims have presented their evidence, extensive evidence from experts, from defector witnesses, from victims. Viewing all that evidence, they found sufficient evidence that Bashar al-Assad and his brother and his two associates have questions to answer. So if they complete their investigation and that their investigation is still underway and they find that there's sufficient evidence to refer it for trial, there is the possibility in France to hold a trial in absentia under certain conditions that protect the rights of defendants. Before that, we'll have a big question about whether an arrest warrant against a foreign sitting head of state, what the meaning of that is. And I hope that this will be a watershed moment in the justice for international crimes, where we finally see that the absolute immunity that foreign sitting heads of state have enjoyed can be called into question, particularly for such significant core international crimes.
And the timing of this arrest warrant seems, at least to me, to be important, because in recent months, Assad, having been seen for a long time as a real pariah on the world stage, is increasingly being welcomed back into the fold, particularly in the Middle East. He's been invited, for example, to the COP climate summit in the UAE later on this month. I wonder, with this arrest warrant now hanging over him, can he realistically go to COP?
Well, so I think first, just to say that timing, I don't think is politically designed at all by the justice system. This is in response to a case that victims and Syrian groups and my own group filed in 2021. But as you say, it's very politically significant, and I think it is really important that the international community not welcome the Assad government back into normal relations, and how could they, knowing now that he's charged with that he's under an arrest warrant for such serious crimes, and we'll find out today what the ICJ says about the violations of the Convention Against Torture.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, although I would like to ask you about that. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. Steve Costas talking to me from the Open Society Justice Initiative. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
In other news, the controversial weed killer glyphosate will continue to be available here in Europe after EU countries failed to find a common position on what to do. Back in 2015, the WHO concluded that the chemical herbicide was probably carcinogenic, and today's decision has been criticised by environmental campaigners, but welcomed by the company Bayer. With more details from Brussels, here's our correspondent, Dave Keating.
The Commission has the right to say, okay, we're going to act on our own because the national governments can't reach a decision. And the Commission has said that it will go ahead and renew the controversial herbicide glyphosate for another 10 years. Now, this has been an incredibly contentious issue at EU level for many, many years. There are some studies that have linked glyphosate to cancer, calling it a carcinogen, also to Parkinson's disease. However, there has never been any definitive proof that glyphosate glyphosate is dangerous to human health. And indeed, the European Food Safety Authority in July said they still could not find any link between hazards to human health and glyphosate. And the industry has said, first and foremost, that the kind of what they say is hysteria about glyphosate is not actually based on science. And they also say that this pesticide is so important to agriculture that it could actually jeopardize food production, that there's no alternative for this because it's so widespread among use. So canceling its use simply because of an unproven link to human health risks is not wise. So we'll see what happens here. I'm just seeing that some NGOs are going to challenge this decision by the Commission using the EU pesticides law, which says that the precautionary principle needs to be followed. So therefore, if there's any possibility of a risk to human health, that something shouldn't be authorized. I'm not sure they'll have success with that, but we'll see. This authorization is expiring on December 15th, so some kind of decision needs to be taken before then.
Dave Keating reporting for us there in Brussels. Now, when it comes to providing the best education for children around the world, for almost a decade now, Vietnamese students have regularly outperformed almost every other country, including Europe and the United States. The communist government there spends more than 20% of its GDP on the school system. Competition is fierce and the emphasis is on results. For our focus report today, our team in Vietnam tell us a little more.
The school day in this rural area of Vietnam begins with the national anthem. It's still only 7:30 a.m. when the first class gets underway. There are 45 students in this class, but the lesson goes without a hitch. A quarter of Vietnam's 100 million people are children. Well-trained teachers are given what they need to cope with large class sizes.
We're trained to teach classes of 45 students. Whenever the children misbehave, I give them a look, and they know that they need to stay focused, or else.
Crucially, teachers are evaluated based on their students' performance. Those whose students succeed are rewarded with a prestigious award for excellence. Lê Ngoc Beach has won 11 of the awards in her 27 years as a teacher.
I can't reveal my secret, but I can say the main ingredient is my love for teaching and the students.
In this communist country, the emphasis is on results, not necessarily equality. The students at this school study 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday, and for 4 hours on Saturday mornings.
Literature is difficult because it requires a deep knowledge to appreciate and understand the author's words.
I pay close attention to every subject. This means I have a good chance of going to university and getting a good job.
This school is located in the remote countryside, yet it's equipped with the latest education technology. And it's not alone. The Vietnamese government requires all municipalities to invest 1/5 of their budget in education.
This year, we bought 12 TVs and lots of tables and chairs and other materials as well. We spent almost 10,000 euros in total.
The government's focus on education is also on display in ordinary households, an expression of the Confucian stress on work and family. Classes end at 5:30 p.m. and Anne heads home, where she'll study for another 3 hours. It's been a long day for this 12-year-old middle school student. She wakes up at 5:30 every morning and goes to bed at 11 p.m.
I think having good results at school is important. I work hard. In the future, I want to become a doctor to save lives.
Anne is working hard to realize her dream. Her family runs a hat-making business, and they're desperate for her to do well at school.
As for us, we only have this traditional work. So I want my little girl to study, get the job she wants, and to be well paid.
Preschools also play their part in Vietnam's success.
Before we go, now I will ask one person in each team, what's your favorite color, right?
At this private nursery, 4- and 5-year-olds are already studying English. This morning, they're using songs to remember the colours.
For the hill and far away, mother does say quack, 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 quack. I want to learn English because it's fun. Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor.
This English teacher has been here for 6 years.
If you teach them English when they are very young, it is easier for them to learn because at a very young age, their brain is very active and they can learn a lot.
The approach works. Vietnamese students are among the best in the world, outperforming their counterparts in Britain and Canada in international evaluations. They include Jia, who has been playing the piano since the age of 5 and has won school prizes. Now aged 13, she speaks fluent English.
I want to take some silver, bronze or gold medals for my family because I think my parents will be happy when I have a prize.
This summer, she won a prize in English and mathematics at a competition in the Philippines. It was the first time she'd competed against students from other countries in Asia, and she made her mother proud.
She was crying when she knew I had gold medals.
But the future is uncertain, even for talented students like Jia. The rate of youth unemployment in Vietnam is 7.5%. But for now, she's happy to be part of a new generation of Vietnamese who are shining on the international education stage.
And that report from our team in Vietnam brings us to the end of this hour of Live from Paris. Thanks for watching and do stay tuned.
Worldviews. France 24 brings you all the news from hotspots around the world. In Asia, France, the Middle East, the Americas, and Africa. From Europe to Oceania, take a daily trip across borders to keep abreast of all the latest international news. Get exclusive updates from our correspondents around the globe. Our daily reports will take you to all 4 corners of the world. Every day, watch World Views on France 24 and France24.com. On France24.com, click Live. Find the stories you want to watch or to read about. Live news 24 hours a day in 4 languages. Explore the topics that captivate you. Are you looking for the latest news or to watch a show on demand? Follow us. Live international news is just a click away. Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Costas, and I report from Geneva for France 24 News on major developments from UN peace talks, global health and emergencies, and Swiss politics and finance.
John Zaracostas, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Hello, I'm Annette Young, the host of the 51%, and in this week's special edition we're coming to you from the South Korean capital of Seoul. This Asian economic powerhouse may be the world's 13th largest economy, but paradoxically when it comes to women's rights it lags way behind other nations according to the World Economic Forum. And under the current ultra-conservative government, feminism has not only become a dirty word but a dangerous one too.
The 51%, presented by Annette Young on France 24 and France24.com.
WESN.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. UDCAT gives new timelines for submission of financial audits. Southwest Regional Health Authorities faces malicious cybersecurity breach. And regionally, Guyanese taxi driver brutally attacked by Venezuelan nationals. Now for the details. The Urban Development Corporation gives new timelines for the submission of its financial audited accounts for the period 2019 to 2022. Chairman of UDCAT, Noel Garcia, gave the update during Wednesday's sitting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. The committee inquired into the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the UDCAT for the financial years 2017 to 2018, and the follow-up on the implementation of the recommendations in the committee's first report of the 12th Parliament. The Southwest Regional Health Authority labels the recent cybersecurity breach as malicious, according to CEO Dr. Brian Amo. Describing the incident as profound, he highlighted measures taken, including the temporary